Hello and thank you for allowing this moment for yourself. You can let go of all focus now, just allow your attention to soften as my voice gently carries you to a place of rest, a place where we find the strange and strangely hopeful story of a surgeon who could rebuild a face. 1 arm at a time. It's a story that unfolds not in a modern, sterile hospital, but in the noisy, messy, and brilliant world of Renaissance Italy. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you wish, you can leave a quiet comment, letting me know what city you're in, and what time it is for you now. It's a nice way of knowing we are all listening together, in our own quiet corners of the world. Alright, let the shadows in your room grow long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing, and together, let's allow the story to begin. The world you find yourself in is loud. Forget the quiet, sun-drenched paintings of rolling Tuscan hills. You are in a city, maybe Bologna, maybe Padua. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, roasting meat, and something vaguely unpleasant coming from the gutters. The sound is a constant chorus of cart wheels on cobblestone, shouting merchants, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. This is the late 1500 seconds, and life is immediate, visceral, and often unkind. And in this world, you have no nose. Perhaps it happened quickly. An argument in a tavern over a game of cards, a perceived slight to your family's honor. Things escalate. Rapiers are drawn. It's not the elegant, swashbuckling duel you see in movies. It's a frantic, clumsy, and brutal affair in a muddy alley. There's a flash of steel, a searing pain across your face, and a sudden, shocking amount of warmth as you fall back. When you come to, the central pillar of your face is simply gone. Your social life, also gone. Or maybe it was a slower, more insidious process. A creeping sickness that the physicians whisper about. The Great Pox. A shadow that fell over Europe a generation or so ago. It starts as a mild nuisance, but over years, it works its way into your very bones. A quiet traitor within. One day you notice the bridge of your nose has begun to sink. Then, it collapses entirely, leaving a sunken, shadowed crater where your nose used to be. The doctors call it a saddle-nose. Everyone else calls it a mark of sin, whether by violence or by disease. The result is the same. You are now a member of a club no one wants to join. In a world that puts immense value on appearance, and on a whole and healthy form, you are visibly, undeniably broken. It's more than a disfigurement. It's a public statement. A missing nose screams failure. It says, I lost a fight. I am a debaucher. I carry a shameful illness. People don't meet your gaze. They look at the hole in the middle of your face, then quickly look away. Children point. Potential employers shake their heads. You learn to walk with your head down, to favor the shadows, to become a ghost in your own city. Historians still debate just how common this sight truly was on the streets of Renaissance Italy. But the sheer number of written accounts, medical texts, and desperate remedies from the period suggests it was a constant, visible problem. It wasn't like losing a finger, which could be hidden in a glove, or a limb that could be managed. Your face was your entry into the world, your letter of introduction, and yours was ruined. Of course, you've tried the alternatives. There are artisans who can craft a replacement, a simple one of papier minus match, painted to match your skin, or perhaps a more expensive one, carved from wood. If you have the coin, you might even commission a nose of pure silver, held on with delicate straps of leather that tie behind your head. But they are all just masks. Cold, lifeless things. They don't warm with your breath on a winter's day. They don't feel the sun, and there is the constant, quiet terror that a sudden sneeze or a jostle in the crowd will send your expensive prosthetic clattering to the ground, revealing your secret shame to the world all over again. So you live in this state of quiet desperation. You've heard whispers, of course, rumors of miracle workers, of alchemists and barbers who claim they can fix such things. Most are charlatans, selling useless ointments and false hope. But recently, a new name has begun to circulate in the taverns and university halls. A name spoken with a mixture of awe and disbelief. A surgeon in Bologna, a man named Tagliacozzi. They say he doesn't just cover the problem. They say he can give you a new nose. A real one, grown from your own flesh. The idea sounds like madness. A fever dream, but as you sit in your darkened room, tracing the empty space on your face with a hesitant finger, madness starts to sound a lot like hope. You pull your cloak a little tighter around your face as you walk. A familiar, reflexive gesture. The sun is bright today, which feels like a personal insult. Shadows are your friends, but the high noon of a Bologna afternoon offers no place to hide. Every glance from a passerby feels like a physical blow, even if it's just a fleeting, curious look. You've become an expert at reading the micro-minus expressions of strangers, the quick flicker of shock, followed by feigned indifference, then a subtle widening of their path to give you more space, as if your misfortune might be contagious. A missing nose isn't just a wound. It's a brand, a scarlet letter carved into the very center of your being. In this society, honor is everything. It's a delicate, invisible architecture that holds up your name, your family, your future, and a duel. The most common source of your particular injury is a brutal form of social calculus. To lose a duel so badly that your opponent takes your nose, well, that is the ultimate declaration of your failure as a man of standing. It's not just that you were unskilled with a blade. It's that your opponent felt entitled to disfigure you, to mark you permanently as a lesser. Every day, the empty space on your face tells the world, I was found wanting. If the cause was disease, the social sentence is even harsher. There's some minus called French disease or great pox, what we now call syphilis, carries a deep moral stain. It's seen not as a medical condition but as a divine punishment for licenses, for a weakness of the soul. Your collapsed nose is viewed as a physical manifestation of your moral decay. You could be the most pious, honorable person in the city, but your face betrays you. It whispers to the priest, the merchant, the baker's wife, that you have engaged in unspeakable acts. Your attempts to secure a good marriage, a respectable job, or even a simple loan are met with polite but firm rejection. Your very presence is a reminder of sin. You see it in the way mothers pull their children closer when you pass. You hear it in the hushed tones that fall over a room when you enter. This isn't just social awkwardness. It's a form of exile. You are an outcast, living in the heart of your own city. And this social death is, in many ways, harder to bear than the physical injury itself. The wound on your face has long since scarred over, but the wound to your spirit is fresh every single morning. One of the strangest parts of your new life is how you become a reluctant expert on folk remedies and back-minor Sally cures. People, often with the best of intentions, will pull you aside and offer absurd advice. One old woman insisted that a poultice of fresh cow dung and marigold petals, applied under a full moon, would encourage the nose to grow back. A traveling salesman tried to sell you a tiny vial of dragon's tear for a small fortune, promising it would regenerate the flesh. You've heard of men who have spent their life savings on these quack cures, their hope dwindling with every failed attempt. And then there's the peculiar case of the Branca family, down in Sicily. Their name is a legend among the noseless. For generations, they have been rumored to possess a secret method of nasal reconstruction. Some say they could graft the nose of another persona servant or purchased slave onto a patient's face. The logistics of this are, of course, nightmarish. You've heard unsettling tales of patients being bound to a donor for days. The two of them forced into a grotesque, inseparable embrace until the flesh took hold. Historians to this day are not entirely sure if the Branca used to owner's nose or, as some texts suggest, skin from the patient's so gnarled. The family guarded their secrets so jealously that their techniques became the stuff of myth, a whispered fairy tale for the desperate. This is the world of rumor and speculation you live in. But the stories about this man in Bologna, Tagliacozzi, feel different. They aren't whispered in hushed, conspiratorial tones. They are discussed, debated, in the halls of the university. He is not a mystical healer or a secretive craftsman. He is a professor of surgery, a man of science and learning. He doesn't promise magic. He promises a procedure, a difficult, painful, and frankly terrifying procedure, from what you've gathered, but a procedure nonetheless. The idea that your public shame could be erased, that you could walk through the city square and receive nothing more than a passing, indifferent glance from a stranger, it's a fantasy so potent it almost hurts to consider. To be anonymous again, to be whole. It is this hope, fragile but fierce, that propels you through the crowded streets. You ignore the stares, the whispers, the weight of your own dishonor. You have an address, a name, and an appointment. You are going to see the surgeon. You are going to see if this man, this Professor Tagliacozzi, can do the impossible. Not just give you a new nose, but give you back your life. The University of Bologna is not a single, grand building but a sprawling, living part of the city itself. Students from all over Europe, draped in the dark robes of scholars, fill the arcaded walkways, arguing in Latin, German, and French. The air here feels different. It's still noisy, but the noise is one of debate and intellectual fervor. This is one of the oldest universities in the world, a place where the human body is not just a vessel for the soul, but a subject of intense, and sometimes controversial, study. You navigate the labyrinth of lecture halls and courtyards until you find the anatomical theater, a place you've only heard about in fearful whispers. It's here that the secrets of the human form are laid bare, and it's near here, in a modest but well-kept building, that you find the offices of Gaspare Tagliacozzi. When you are finally shown into his study, the man who greets you is not the wild side, blood spattered butcher you might have imagined. He is perhaps in his 40s, with a calm, intelligent face framed by a neat, dark beard. His eyes are deeply observant, taking in your cloaked form, the downturned gaze, the subtle tension in your shoulders, all without a hint of morbid curiosity or pity. He moves with a quiet confidence, a man comfortable in his own skin and in his formidable reputation. He gestures for you to sit, and you do so, your heart pounding a nervous rhythm against your ribs. This is the man who holds your future in his hands. Gaspare Tagliacozzi is a product of this unique environment. He is a surgeon, which in many parts of Europe is still considered a trade for barbers and craftsmen. A step below the high-minded physicians who diagnose illnesses but rarely touch a patient. But here in Bologna, surgery is elevated. It is a science. Tagliacozzi is a professor, a respected scholar. He can quote Aristotle and Celsius as easily as he can handle a scalpel. He begins by asking you questions, his voice even unmeasured. He wants to know the story of your injury, not for gossip, you realize, but for practical reasons. Was the bone damaged? How much tissue was lost? He listens with an unnerving stillness, his gaze analytical. You find yourself lowering your cloak, allowing him to see the full extent of the damage. For the first time in years, you feel like you are being seen not as a monster or a sinner, but as a problem to be solved. A complex, biological puzzle. As he examines you, you notice the room around you. It's filled with books, thick, leather-bound tomes line the walls, their spines stamped with gold leaf. There are anatomical charts, detailed drawings of muscles and skeletons. On a side table, there's a collection of strangely shaped metal instruments, gleaming and sharp. They look more like tools for a watchmaker or an engineer than a doctor. This is not the den of a mystic. It is the workshop of a master craftsman. Tagliacozzi's reputation is built on a foundation of both brilliance and controversy. He is one of the very few surgeons who believe in a concept called reconstruction. Most of his peers are focused on amputation and cauterization, on removing the damaged part. Tagliacozzi, however, is obsessed with rebuilding. He is known throughout the city for his skill in repairing torn lips and damaged ears. Delicate work that most surgeons wouldn't even attempt. But it is his work on noses that has made him a legend. You learn later that he wasn't just a surgeon, but a kind of Renaissance multi-hyphenate. He was a published poet, a respected citizen, and a deeply religious man. This last part is perhaps the most surprising. You might expect a man who reshapes human faces to be playing God, but Tagliacozzi saw his work differently. For him, restoring a person's face was an act of profound compassion, a way to alleviate suffering and restore the dignity that God had intended for them. It was a strange and, for some, a blasphemous idea. Even today, historians debate whether he was seen by his contemporaries as a pious healer or a man pushing the boundaries of divine law. His writings suggest he saw no conflict, believing his skill was a gift from God, to be used for the benefit of mankind. A fascinating, and slightly unnerving, detail of his practice was his emphasis on patient psychology. He understood that the procedure was not just a physical ordeal but a mental one. He was known to be incredibly selective about his patients. He wasn't just assessing your wound, he was assessing your character. He needed to know if you had the fortitude, the patience, the sheer mental resilience to endure what was to come. Some accounts say he would turn away wealthy nobles if he felt they were too frivolous or impatient, and instead take on a poor but determined commoner. As he finishes his examination, he leans back in his chair. He doesn't make any grand promises. He doesn't offer you a miracle cure. Instead, he begins to explain, in calm, precise detail, what he proposes to do. He talks about raising a flap of skin from your arm, about nourishing it, about attaching it to your face. The words are so methodical, so detached from the terrifying reality they describe, that for a moment it sounds almost reasonable. He is the calm center of a storm you are about to enter, the brilliant, steady mind of Bologna, and you have a terrifying feeling that you're going to trust him. He watches you, letting the silence in the room hang for a moment after he has spoken. He knows the idea he has just planted in your mind is monstrous. Growing a nose on your arm. It sounds less like medicine and more like something from Ovid's Metamorphoses, a tale of gods and monsters and grotesque transformations. You suspect he.s. waiting to see if you'll laugh in disbelief, or simply run from the room. But then, he does something unexpected. He rises from his chair and walks over to a heavy, locked chest in the corner of the room. He produces a key from his belt and opens it. From within, he carefully lifts out not a medical text, but a dusty, ancient Midas-looking manuscript. He unrolls it carefully on his desk. The script is not the familiar Italian of your day, nor is it the scholarly Latin of the university. It's something else, something older. The idea, he says, his voice softer now, is not mine alone. It is an echo, a whisper from the past that most have forgotten. He explains that what he proposes is a refinement of a very old technique, one that has been lost and rediscovered over centuries. He tells you about a man named Sos H. Ruta, a surgeon in ancient India who lived thousands of years ago. In his great work, the Sos H. Ruta Samshita, this ancient physician described a method for reconstructing a nose using a flap of skin taken from the patient's forehead. It was a procedure performed on criminals and prisoners of war who had suffered judicial amputation. Think about that for a moment. Plastic surgery. This thing you associate with modern vanity may have its deepest roots in an act of mercy for the most dishonored members of an ancient society. He speaks of how this knowledge traveled, a slow migration of ideas along trade routes, how it may have trickled into the Roman world, where the great medical writer Celsus mentioned the possibility of reconstructing lips and ears with nearby skin. But Celsus was a compiler, a writer, not a surgeon. The actual practice, the hands minus on knowledge, seemed to fade into obscurity with the fall of Rome. The Dark Ages, it turns out, weren't just dark for culture and learning, but for the art of healing as well. Then he brings the story closer to home, to Italy. He mentions the Branca family of Sicily, the almost mythical figures you'd already heard whispers about. He speaks of them with respect, as keepers of a flame. He explains that they likely took the ancient Indian method and modified it, preferring to use skin from the upper arm rather than the forehead. Why the change? This is one of those questions historians still puzzle over. Perhaps they felt a scar on the bicep was more easily hidden than one on the forehead, preserving the patient's appearance even further. Or maybe they found the skin on the arm to be more pliable, better suited for sculpting. Tagliacozzi admits he doesn't know for sure, as the Branca-esque kept their methods a closely guarded family secret. What Tagliacozzi has done, he explains, is apply the rigor of university science to this ancient, almost folkloric curve. He has studied the anatomy, perfected the instruments, and documented the procedure with a level of detail no one has ever attempted before. He has transformed it from a secret art into a repeatable science. He isn't a magician. He's a scholar who has done his homework. He has read the whispers and the echoes from the past and has given them a clear, powerful voice. One of the most radical, and frankly terrifying, things he has refined is the concept of the pedicle flap. This is the technical term for the piece of skin on your arm. He explains that the flap cannot be cut off completely and simply stuck on your face. It would die. The key, the absolute genius of the method, is that the flap must remain attached to your arm at one end. This pedicle acts as a lifeline, a bridge that allows blood from your arm to continue feeding the skin, keeping it alive while it learns to grow onto its new home on your face. This is why your arm must be strapped to your head. The nose on your arm is not a separate thing. For a time, it is a living bridge between two parts of your body. You realize now why he is so respected and so feared. He has taken a legend and made it real. He has looked back into the mists of history and pulled out an idea of almost unbelievable audacity. It's a humbling thought. The solution to your very modern, very personal problem of social exclusion doesn't come from a new discovery, but from a chain of knowledge stretching back through the Renaissance, the Middle Ages, all the way to a surgeon on the banks of the Ganges River thousands of years ago. He rolls the ancient manuscript back up and places it carefully back in its chest. The demonstration is over. He has shown you that his work, while revolutionary, stands on the shoulders of giants. It's a clever move. It makes the impossible seem historical, grounded. It transforms a terrifying, unprecedented ordeal into a legacy. And now, you are being invited to become a part of that legacy. The question is, are you brave enough to accept? Use up there, the weight of history settling upon you. The stories of ancient India and Sicilian secret societies are fascinating, but they are abstract. Now, the conversation turns from the past to your immediate future, and the theoretical becomes terrifyingly concrete. Tagliacozzi leans forward again, his demeanor shifting from that of a historian to that of a general outlining a campaign. He looks you directly in the eye, his gaze unwavering. "I will not lie to you," he says, his tone leaving no room for misunderstanding. "The path ahead is not an easy one. It will demand more from you than you can possibly imagine." He begins to describe the process, and with each sentence, the knot in your stomach tightens. He doesn't use vague, comforting language. He uses the precise, detached vocabulary of an anatomist, and it is this very precision that makes it so chilling. First, he says, you will need to prepare the recipient site. That's the raw, scarred crater in the middle of your face. You will need to take a blade and carefully cut away the scar tissue, freshening the edges of the wound to create a fertile ground for the new flesh to graft onto. He says this as calmly as if he were describing how a gardener prepares a plot of soil for a new plant. You try not to flinch. Then, he gestures to your arm, your strong, healthy bicep. "This will be our nursery," he says. He explains that he will measure and mark a section of skin on your upper arm. The size and shape must be exact. Too small, and the new nose will be inadequate. Too large, and it may not survive. He will then make 2 parallel incisions into your arm, lifting a rectangle of skin and the underlying layer of fat. But this is the crucial part, leaving the 2 ends attached. This will create a small, living bridge of flesh on your own arm. He pauses, letting you absorb this. You instinctively glance at your bicep, trying to picture it. A piece of your own arm, partially sliced off and raised up. It's an image of self minus mutilation, done with surgical intent. The next stage, he explains, is the delay. For a period of about 2 weeks, this flap of skin will be tended to like a delicate garden. It will be lifted daily, with a piece of linen placed beneath it to prevent it from healing back down onto your arm. This process, he says, trains the flap. It encourages the blood vessels at one end of the flap, the end that will eventually become the pedicle, the lifeline, to grow stronger, preparing it for the monumental task of keeping the entire flap alive once the other end is severed. It is a bizarre and fascinating concept. You will be actively cultivating a future piece of your face on your bicep. During this time, you will be a patient in his care. You will need to keep the area clean, to watch for any sign of putrefaction, and to endure the discomfort. Then, once he is satisfied that the flap is robust enough, the main procedure will begin. This is the part you have been dreading. He will bring you back to this room, or one like it. He will sever one end of the skin flap on your arm. He will then lift your arm up to your face, and with a series of fine silk stitches, he will attach the raw, bleeding edge of the flap to one side of the prepared wound on your face. Then he will do the same on the other side, and then you will be joined. He describes the harness, a complex contraption of leather straps and buckles, custom-made by a master saddler. It will hold your arm rigidly in place, your hand perhaps cupped over the top of your head, your bicep pressed firmly against your cheek and nose. Your head will be tilted, your arm immobile. You will be locked into this position. For how long? You barely dare to ask. 20 days, he says, without a flicker of emotion. More or less. We must wait for the flesh to unite, for the vessels from your face to grow into the flap, to claim it as their own. Only then is it safe to sever the connection to the arm. 20 days. Nearly 3 weeks. You try to imagine it. 20 days unable to turn your head. 20 days with your arm strapped to your face. A living appendage feeding a new part of you into existence. 20 days of utter dependency, of excruciating boredom and discomfort. The consultation has become a trial. He is not just telling you the plan. He is testing your resolve. Historians often wonder about these consultations. Did Tagliacozzi downplay the pain? Did he emphasize the glory of the final result? The evidence from his own writings suggests the opposite. He seems to have been brutally honest. He believed the patient's full and informed consent was crucial, not just for legal or ethical reasons, but for the success of the procedure itself. A patient who knew what was coming was a patient who could prepare, who could steel themselves against the ordeal. A patient who was surprised by the horror of it would panic, struggle, and potentially ruin the delicate work. He falls silent again. The room is quiet save for the distant sounds of the city. He has laid out the map of your journey. It is a landscape of pain, patience, and a kind of grotesque intimacy with your own body. He has not asked for your answer yet. He has simply given you the truth. The choice, he implies with his silence, is yours and yours alone. Is the dream of a normal life worth the nightmare of this cure? The silence in the room stretches on, filled only by the weight of the decision you must make. Your mind races, trying to weigh the abstract horror of the procedure against the concrete misery of your daily life. You think of the averted gazes, the whispered comments, the lonely nights. Then you think of the harness, the knife, the 20 days of torment. Finally, you find your voice. And the cost, you ask. the word sounding small and inadequate in the grand scope of what's being discussed. Tagliacozzi's expression remains neutral. He understands that this is not just a question about money, but about the total price of this transformation. He addresses the financial aspect first, as it is the simplest. The fee is substantial. It is a sum that would buy a fine horse, or rent a modest house for a year. For a man of means, it is a significant but manageable expense. For a commoner, it would require selling land or plunging a family into debt for a generation. But he quickly moves on, waving a dismissive hand as if the money is the least important part of the transaction. The coin is a simple matter, he says. The true cost is measured in other currencies, in patience, in stillness, and in trust. He elaborates on the 20 days in the harness. He calls it the Great Confinement. During this time, you will not be a free man. You will be, in essence, a living statue. You will be entirely dependent on others for the most basic human needs. You will need someone to bring you broth and spoon it carefully into your mouth, as you cannot lower your head to a bowl. You will need someone to help you with the chamber pot. You will need someone to sit with you, not just for company, but to ensure you do not, in a moment of sleepy confusion or maddening frustration, try to tear the harness off. This is a cost of dignity. You, the grown man, will be rendered as helpless as an infant. You must surrender all autonomy. This, he explains, is often the hardest part for the proud men who come to him seeking to restore their honor. They must first endure a period of profound humility. Then there is the cost of pain, while Tagliacozzi is a master of his craft. This is an age before anesthetics. There will be no gentle slide into unconsciousness. The freshening of the wound on your face will be done while you are fully awake, perhaps after a large draught of strong wine and with two of his assistants holding you firmly in place. You will feel the bite of the blade. You will feel the needle pulling the silk threads through your flesh. The only comfort he can offer is the promise of his speed and precision. But the pain, he explains, is not just in the initial moments of cutting and stitching. It is a dull, constant companion throughout the process, the ache in your neck from being held in one position, the throbbing in your arm where the skin has been lifted, the maddening itch of the healing wounds, an itch you absolutely cannot scratch. This is a cost paid in physical endurance. There is also a social cost, a more subtle one. You must disappear from the world for the better part of 2 months, the initial 2 weeks of preparing the flap, the 3 weeks in the harness, and then several more weeks of bandaging and recovery as he sculpts the new nose. You cannot work. You cannot attend to your business. You must place your entire life on hold. You must have a support system, a family or a trusted servant, who can manage your affairs and care for your needs. One of the most peculiar and debated aspects of his practice involves this very support system. Some historical sources suggest that Tagliacozzi would sometimes insist on housing his patients himself, or in a nearby residence he controlled. It wasn't just about collecting a fee for room and board. It was about control. He needed to ensure the patient followed his strict instructions to the letter. He couldn't trust them to go home and potentially ignore his advice, or worse, fall into the hands of a rival physician who might question his methods. Historians argue whether this was a sign of his meticulous nature or a shrewd business tactic to ensure his secrets and his successes were closely managed. So the price of a new face is this: a hefty sum of money, a complete loss of independence, weeks of constant, grinding discomfort, and a total withdrawal from your life. He lays all of this out for you, not as a deterrent, but as an honest accounting. He is selling you a new life, but he is making sure you read the terms and conditions. As he speaks, you realize he is offering you a strange kind of bargain. He will take from you your gold, your freedom, and your comfort. In exchange, he will give you back something you thought you had lost forever: a future. The ability to walk into a room with your head held high, the chance to look someone in the eye. This simple, profound gift of being unremarkable. You look at his hands. They are clean, steady, and surprisingly elegant. These are the hands that will cut you, stitch you, and sculpt you. They are the hands that will guide you through this ordeal. The cost is immense, higher than you had imagined. But, as you sit there, in the quiet of his study, you find yourself making a silent calculation, and for the first time, the possibility of a normal life feels like it might just be worth the price. Your decision is made. A quiet nod is all it takes. The word yes feels too small for the magnitude of what you've just agreed to. A flicker of something not quite a smile, but a look of professional satisfaction crosses Tagliacozzie's face. The consultation is over. The preparation begins. He gives you a list of instructions for the coming weeks. Your life is about to become very, very simple. You are to eat well, he insists. Good, hearty food, roasted meats, bread, fresh vegetables. Your body is about to become a battlefield, and it needs to be well supplied. You are to drink wine, but in moderation, and you are to sleep. He stresses this point. A well-rested body, he believes, heals faster. This focus on the patient's overall health, or constitution, was a cornerstone of his approach, setting him apart from surgeons who saw the patient as little more than a piece of meat on a table. The day of the first procedure arrives sooner than you'd like. You return to his workshop, but this time you are led past the study into a different room. It's a clean, well-lit space, dominated by a sturdy wooden chair that looks anything like a throne of judgment. There are no other patients. His practice is private, discreet. Just you, the surgeon, and two burly assistants whose calm expressions are somehow not reassuring at all. The air is thick with the scent of something sharp and durable. He believed in cleanliness, a concept that was still surprisingly novel. While the full understanding of germs was centuries away, Tagliacozzi and other university surgeons of his era had an intuitive sense that clean tools, clean linens, and clean hands led to better outcomes. They were meticulous about washing their instruments and using fresh bandages, even if they couldn't explain precisely why it worked. Now you face the stark reality of 16th-century anesthesia. There is none, not in the way we think of it. There is no gentle slide into unconsciousness. Your anesthetic is a large goblet of the strongest red wine you have ever tasted. It's rough, fiery, and you're instructed to drink it down quickly. It doesn't numb the pain. Not really, but it blurs the edges of your fear. It makes the world a little hazy, a little less immediate. As the wine takes hold, a warm fog settling over your brain. The assistants guide you to the chair. They don't bind you. Not yet. Tagliacozzi believes a willing, conscious patient is better than a struggling, terrified one. But their presence is a clear message. You are to remain still. Tagliacozzi approaches, not with a blade, but with a piece of charcoal. He has you bare your arm, and he begins to draw on your bicep. You watch, detached, as he sketches the precise rectangle of your future nose onto your skin. He measures it against your face, his expression one of intense concentration. He is no longer a doctor. He is a tailor, measuring his cloth. Then, he sets the charcoal aside and picks up his tools from the tray. They have been boiled and laid out neatly on a clean linen cloth. There is a small, razor-sharp scalpel, a set of fine forceps, and needles already threaded with dark silk. He holds the scalpel up to the light, chucking its edge. The sight of its ends a jolt of cold clarity through the wine-induced haze. This is real. He speaks to you, his voice calm and steady, telling you what he is about to do. Just as he described in the study, a moment of courage now. He says softly, breathe deep, hold fast. There's a fascinating, and somewhat terrifying, debate among medical historians about the use of opiates during this period. While poppy-based painkillers were known, they were considered unreliable and dangerous. An overdose could be fatal, and the effective dose was incredibly hard to judge. Some surgeons might have used a tincture of laudanum, but Tagliacozzi's own writings are conspicuously silent on the matter. He speaks of wine, of mental fortitude, of swiftness, but not of powerful painkillers. It's likely he considered the risk of using them greater than the benefit, preferring to rely on the patient's own resilience and his own speed. It was a brutal calculation, but a necessary one in his time. You grip the arms of the chair, your knuckles turning white. You fix your gaze on a crack in the ceiling, focusing on it as if it holds the secrets of the universe. The assistants brace firm, heavy hands on your shoulders. It is not a violent restraint, but an absolute one. You will not move. You hear a small, sharp intake of breath, his, not yours, the sound of a craftsman beginning his work. And then you feel it. A line of pure, white minus hot fire is drawn across your arm. The pain is electric, absolute. It erases every other thought, every other sensation. Your world shrinks to that single, searing line, and before you can even fully register it, you feel a second line, parallel to the first. He is as fast as he promised. The worst part is over in a matter of seconds, but the journey has just begun. The initial shock of the pain begins to subside, replaced by a deep, throbbing ache that seems to radiate from your arm through your entire body. The wine you drank now feels useless, a thin veil that the raw reality of the moment has torn right through. You can smell the coppery scent of your own blood, a smell that will become intimately familiar to you in the weeks to come. Tagliacozzi is working quickly, his movements economical and precise. He is not a man who wastes a single motion. He uses a pair of forceps to gently lift the rectangle of skin he has just outlined. You risk a glance down and are immediately confronted with a sight that your brain struggles to process. It is your own arm, but it is wrong. A section of your skin, a perfect, bleeding rectangle, is being peeled away from the muscle beneath. It's a moment of profound and disturbing dissociation. You are watching your own body being deconstructed, piece by piece. He takes a small, clean piece of linen, folded into a thick pad, and carefully slides it under the flap. The fabric immediately begins to soak with blood. He explains, his voice still infuriatingly calm, that this is to prevent the flap from healing back down. It must learn to live apart, he says, as if he were talking about a rebellious child, not a piece of your flesh. The assistants, who have been standing by with an almost bored professionalism, now step in to bandage the wound. They wrap your arm tightly, securing the linen pad in place. The pressure is a relief. A firm hand on the screaming nerve endings. The initial surgery, the first cut, is over. It took less than half an hour. It felt like a lifetime. You are helped from the chair, your legs unsteady. The combination of wine, shock, and adrenaline leaves you feeling light-headed and weak. You are given another drink, this time of cool water, and instructed to rest. But you are not sent home. For these first few days, you will remain under his direct observation. You are shown to a small, sparse room. There is a bed, a table, and a single window that looks out onto a quiet courtyard. This is to be your world for the next 2 weeks. This is the delay period, the bizarre and crucial stage of preparation. Your job now is simple: to exist, to eat the food that is brought to you, to sleep, and to let your body begin the strange process of healing and adaptation. Each day, Tagliacozzi or one of his trusted assistants unwraps your arm. This is a ritual you come to both dread and anticipate. The old, blood-soaked linen is removed, and the wound is cleaned with wine or a simple saline solution. For a few moments, the flap is exposed to the air. You can see it. A pale, swollen island of skin, connected to your arm by 2 bridges of flesh at either end. It looks angry and alien. Then, a fresh piece of linen is tucked beneath it, and the arm is wrapped. The process is uncomfortable, but it is the training he spoke of. He is forcing the blood supply to reorganize, to favor one end of the flap over the other. He is, in essence, speaking to your body in the language of controlled injury, and your body, in its ancient wisdom, is listening. A strange and little minus known aspect of this phase was the psychological toll. Patients would often become obsessed with the flap. It was a source of constant anxiety. Is it the right color? Does it look infected? You find yourself lying awake at night, convinced you can feel it withering, dying on your arm. You are growing a part of your future face, and the fear of failure is immense. Tagliacozzi understood this. His daily visits were as much about reassuring the patient as they were about inspecting the wound. He would point out the healthy pink color, the lack of laudable pus, a confusing but common medical concept at the time, where certain types of pus were seen as a sign of healthy healing, and assure you that everything was proceeding as it should. Historians still debate the true necessity and efficacy of this delay period. Was 2 weeks the magic number? Could it have been shorter? Tagliacozzi's own writings are very specific about the timing, but the science behind it was purely empirical. He knew it worked because he had seen it work. He had likely learned through trial and error the unfortunate failures patients that rushing this stage lead to disaster. The flap would die after being transferred, turning a dark, necrotic black and sloughing off the patient's face in a matter of days. It's a grisly thought. But your health is benefiting from the misfortunes of those who came before you. So you wait. The days blend into one another, marked only by the changing of the bandage and the meals that appear at your door. You learn the patterns of the sunlight as it moves across the courtyard floor. You listen to the distant city sounds. You feel the constant ache in your arm. And you watch the strained knitting graft. This piece of you that is no longer quite you. It is a nose in waiting, a promise of a future, being nurtured in the most unsettling way imaginable. The 2 weeks pass with the slowness of a glacier. Each day is a copy of the one before, a monotonous cycle of waking, eating, enduring the bandage change, and waiting. Your world has shrunk to the 4 walls of your room and the strange, tender landscape of your own bicep. You've become intimately familiar with the living flap. You notice subtle changes in its color and texture. In the first few days, it was pale and swollen, a frightening sight. But slowly, under Tagliacozzi's care, it has begun to look healthier, more robust. The edges of the wound are less angry, and the skin itself has a pinkish hue that speaks of good blood flow. It's a strange thing to feel pride in, this carefully cultivated wound. But you do. You are a gardener tending to a single, precious, and very bizarre plant. Tagliacozzi inspects it daily, his touch gentle but firm. He lifts the flap slightly, peering underneath, assessing the state of the nursery. He is looking for signs of life and vitality. It's a process that feels both medical and mystical. He's reading the secrets of your flesh, and you can only watch and hope he likes what he sees. This process highlights a fascinating aspect of Renaissance medicine, the deep reliance on sensory information. Without microscopes or modern diagnostic tools, a surgeon's greatest assets were his eyes, his hands, and even his nose. Tagliacozzi would assess the color of the tissue, the amount and consistency of any fluid, the warmth of the skin, and even the smell of the wound. A faint, sweetish smell might be acceptable, part of the healing process. So, putrid odor was a sign of gangrene, a death sentence for the flap and a mortal danger to you. The line between success and failure was incredibly fine, and it was judged by senses that we have largely replaced with lab reports. One afternoon, after his daily inspection, he gives you a nod of approval. It is ready, he says. The 2 weeks of training are complete. The flap has been strengthened, prepared. It is time for the next, most dreaded stage of the journey. The relief you feel is immediately swamped by a fresh wave of anxiety. The preparations for the main surgery are more intense. The night before, you are given a light meal and advised to pray, not just for the salvation of your soul, but for the courage of your body. The next morning, you are once again brought to the operating chair. The 2 assistants are there, their presence more ominous this time. The goblet of wine is larger. Tagliacozzi is all business. He unwraps your arm for the last time in this phase. He examines the flap one final time, a general reviewing his troops before a major battle. Then he turns his attention to your face. This is the part you have been pushing to the back of your mind, freshening the edges. It sounds so innocuous, like a baker dusting a loaf with flour. The reality is anything but. He takes a small, sharp, curved knife. One of the assistants holds your head steady. You are instructed to close your eyes, but you can't. You watch, mesmerized, as the blade approaches the sunken, scarred area where your nose used to be. He works with incredible speed. He is not hacking or sawing. He is carving, with a few deft movements. He trims the old, pale scar tissue from the edges of the cavity. The goal is to expose the fresh, bleeding, living tissue underneath. This is what the new nose will need to bond with. It's a strange and bloody kind of plumbing, preparing the pipes to connect. The pain is sharp and shocking, completely different from the dull ache in your arm. This is your face. It's a violation of a more intimate space. Historians who study Tagliacozzi's work are often struck by his almost artistic approach to this stage. He wasn't just creating a raw wound, he was sculpting a foundation. The shape of these incisions, the angle at which he cuts, would determine the final placement and appearance of the nose. He had to visualize the final result before the first piece of flesh was even attached. It was a remarkable feat of three-dimensional thinking, all performed on a conscious, terrified patient. Once he is satisfied, the wound on your face is packed with clean linen to stanch the bleeding, and he turns his attention back to your arm. This is the point of no return, with a single, swift cut. He severs the flap at one of its two ends, the one he has determined is weaker. The flap is now free on one side, a living peninsula of skin, attached to your arm by that single, vital pedicle. It is this pedicle that will keep it alive for the next 3 weeks. The assistants immediately move to lift your arm, bending your elbow, raising it up towards your head in a motion you have tried, and failed, to imagine comfortably. Your arm is being brought to your face. The nursery is being delivered to its new home. The moment of the uncomfortable embrace has arrived. The world tilts, or rather, you are tilted to meet it. The assistants are strong and efficient, moving you like a piece of complex furniture. They raise your arm, positioning it so the loose, bleeding flap of skinned angles just in front of your face. For a surreal moment, you can see this part of your own arm, hovering, waiting. It's an out-minus of minus body experience, except you are painfully, terrifyingly inside your own body. Your head is pushed forward and to the side, into a position that feels profoundly unnatural. Your cheek is pressed against your bicep. The smell of your own skin, of blood and wine minus wash, fills your nostrils, or where your nostrils should be. It's an oddly intimate and simultaneously grotesque moment. Tagliacozzi is now a whirlwind of focused activity. He removes the packing from your facial wound with a fine pair of forceps. He takes the edge of the arm flap and delicately brings it to meet the freshly cut edge of skin on your cheek, and then the needle. You feel a sharp prick, then a pulling sensation as he pushes the silk thread through the flap from your arm, and then through the skin of your face. He is stitching you to yourself. He works his way up one side, his movements quick and sure. Each stitch is a new anchor, a new commitment to this bizarre union. Prick, pull, knot, prick, pull, knot. You try to count the stitches to distract yourself, but you lose track after 5 or 6. He moves to the other side, folding the flap slightly to create the basic shape of a nasal bridge, and begins stitching the other edge of the flap to the other side of the wound. He is not just attaching it, he is sculpting as he goes, creating the rudimentary structure that will, weeks from now, be refined into a nose. It's like watching a tailor create a garment, except the fabric is your living flesh and the thread is binding you into a contortionist pose. The process feels endless. The initial sharp pain of each stitch gives way to a chorus of dull, aching protests from your neck, your shoulder, your back. Your body is already screaming that this position is wrong. Once the last stitch is in place, the flap is secured. You are now, in a very real sense, one continuous piece of anatomy from your face to your arm. But you cannot be trusted to hold this position. The slightest movement in your sleep, a moment of forgetfulness, could tear the delicate stitches and ruin the entire operation. This is where the harness comes in. It's a fearsome minus-looking object, something you'd expect to see in a dungeon or a stables rather than a surgeon's office. It's a bespoke creation of thick, stiff leather and polished steel buckles. It's not a simple bandage. It's a piece of engineering. The assistants bring it forward, and the process of fitting it begins. A vest minus-like piece is strapped tightly around your torso. A series of straps run up from the vest to a cap that is secured on your head. Another set of straps is carefully buckled around your forearm and wrist. Then, the final, crucial connections are made. Your arm, already positioned against your face, is now lashed to your head and torso by a web of leather. Buckles are pulled tight. Straps are cinched. The harness takes over from your screaming muscles. It holds your head tilted. It holds your arm immobile against your cheek. Your hand is fixed in a position somewhere over the top of your head, as if you are in a permanent, awkward salute. You try to turn your head, but you can't. You try to lower your arm, but it's immovable. You are locked in. The uncomfortable embrace is now an unbreakable one. The level of detail and craftsmanship in these harnesses is a strange and often overlooked part of the story. Tagliacozzi didn't make them himself. He worked with highly skilled leather workers and armorers. The designs evolved over his career, becoming more complex and, supposedly, more comfortable, a relative term, to be sure. Some historical diagrams show incredibly intricate versions with padded linings and adjustable joints. It's a testament to the fact that the success of the surgery depended as much on this piece of orthopedic engineering as it did on the surgeon's skill with a knife. You are finally released from the chair. You stand up, a new, lopsided creature. Your center of gravity is off. The world looks stilted. A wave of dizziness and nausea washes over you. This is your reality for the next 3 weeks. This harness is your new skin. This bizarre, fixed posture is your new existence. Tagliacozzi looks at his handiwork, not with sympathy, but with the critical eye of an artisan inspecting a finished product. He checks the tension on the straps, makes a final adjustment, and gives a satisfied nod. The surgical part is done. Now, the test of endurance begins. The first day in the harness is a voyage into a new and terrible country. Every instinct in your body rebels against the enforced stillness. Your neck muscles, accustomed to a lifetime of free movement, are now locked in a battle against the unyielding leather straps. A dull, burning ache begins to spread from the base of your skull down to your shoulder blade. It's a pain that will become your constant companion, a baseline of suffering from which all other discomforts will be measured. You are led back to your room, moving with the shuffling, awkward gait of an old man. The simple act of walking through a doorway requires a complex negotiation, a tilting and turning of your entire torso to accommodate your new, rigid silhouette. You are a ship that has suddenly grown a second, misplaced mast. Sleep, what you crave, is a cruel joke. How do you lie down when you cannot turn your head? You are propped up on a mountain of pillows and bolsters, somewhere between sitting and reclining. Every time you begin to drift off, a fresh jolt of pain from your neck or a surge of anxiety about the delicate stitches on your face snaps you back to consciousness. You spend the night in a state of shallow, intermittent stupor, never truly resting. The passing of time becomes a strange, syrupy thing, without the normal rhythms of movement. The hours stretch into infinity. You measure the day not by the sun's position in the sky. You can only see one small patch of it from your fixed vantage point, but by the sounds from the courtyard outside. The morning delivery carts. The midday chatter of students. The evening bells. These are your only clocks. And then there is the itching. As the wounds on your face and arm begin the slow process of healing, They begin to itch with a maddening intensity. It's a deep, unreachable torment. The source of the itch on your face is literally buried under your own bicep. The wound on your arm is swaddled in bandages, encased in the leather harness. To scratch is an impossibility, a forbidden paradise. You try rubbing your cheek against your arm, but it only makes it worse. You learn to breathe through the waves of itching, to find a place in your mind that is beyond the torment of your own skin. Your diet consists of liquids and soft mashes, broth, porridge, stewed fruits, anything that can be eaten from a spoon, brought to your lips by a careful attendant. The simple, pleasurable act of feeding yourself is gone. You are completely reliant on another person's patience and steady hand. It's a lesson in humility served up 3 times a day. This period of 20 days Tagliacozzi's prescribed duration was not a random number. It was the result of clinical experience. He had learned that this was roughly the amount of time required for mucus villosupation to occur. That's the miraculous biological process at the heart of the whole procedure. Tiny new blood vessels from your face, from the recipient site, were at this very moment beginning to grow, to creep across the stitched boundary and into the flap of skin from your arm. They were like microscopic pioneers, forging new supply lines. The slope, which for now was being kept alive solely by the pedicle on your arm, was slowly being adopted, colonized by your face. But this process was invisible, silent, and required a leap of faith. A strange and rarely discussed complication of this period was oral. Being fixed in this position, with one ear partially obstructed by your own arm, could play tricks on your hearing. Sounds became muffled. Directional cues confused. This could lead to a sense of disorientation and even mild vertigo, adding another layer of misery to the experience. It was a complete sensory disruption. You develop a strange relationship with the harness. You hate it. It is your tormentor, your prison, but it is also your protector. It is the only thing ensuring that the fragile work on your face is not undone. You feel its weight and its unyielding strength as a constant, perverse comfort. It is proof that the process is ongoing, that you are on the path. Day after day, you sit in your chair or lie propped on your bed. You count the bricks in the wall. You listen to the city breathe. You feel the slow, deep ache in your muscles and the maddening itch of healing flesh. You are a living science experiment, a testament to human ingenuity and human endurance. And all you can do is wait. Wait for the 20th day. Wait for the blade that will finally set you free. Your world, once as wide as the city of Bologna, has now shrunk to the size of a single room. The 4 walls are your horizon, the ceiling your sky. The window, with its limited view of the courtyard, is your only connection to the outside world. You have become a prisoner, and your jailer is your own body. The boredom is a physical presence, a heavy cloak that smothers you. In the first few days, the pain and the sheer novelty of your situation were enough to occupy your mind. But as your body grudgingly begins to accept its new reality, the emptiness rushes in. There are no books to read. Holding one and turning the pages is an impossible feat of contortion. There is no one to play cards with. Your conversations are limited to the brief, functional exchanges with the attendant who brings your meals. You spend hours in a single, high-backed chair. It's been padded with cushions to provide as much support as possible. But after a few hours, even the softest padding feels like stone. You sit, and you wait. The sheer inactivity is a form of torture. Your mind, untethered from any meaningful task, begins to wander into dark places. You start to obsess over the what-ifs. What if the graft doesn't take? What if, after all this, the flap withers and dies the moment it's severed from your arm? You would be left with nothing but new scars and a depleted purse. What if you get a fever, an infection? In this era, any infection could be a death sentence. You imagine the bad humors gathering in your blood, the creeping signs of putrefaction that Tagliacozzi warned you about. Every twinge, every unusual warmth, sends a fresh spike of panic through you. To combat the crushing monotony, you develop small rituals. You meticulously track the progress of a spider building a web in the corner of the ceiling. You create elaborate backstories for the few people you see crossing the courtyard: the stooped kitchen servant, the swaggering student, the black minus-clad physician. They become characters in a silent play that unfolds for you each day. One of the most surprising historical debates around this procedure is about the mental health of the patients. Tagliacozzi, in his writings, focuses almost entirely on the physical aspects of the surgery. He gives precise instructions on bandaging, diet, and posture, but he writes very little about the psychological state of a person locked in a harness for 3 weeks. Did patients suffer from what we might now call depression or anxiety? Almost certainly. How was it managed? Some historians speculate that the role of the patient's family or paid companions was crucial. They weren't just there to feed the patient. They were there to provide a constant, reassuring presence, to read aloud, to talk, to simply be there to ward off the demons of isolation. For those without such support, the mental ordeal must have been as taxing as the physical one. You learn to find a strange sort of peace in the stillness. You've always been a person of action, of movement. Now, you are forced to simply be. You notice things you never would have before. The way the light changes minute by minute. The complex symphony of distant city sounds. The rhythm of your own breathing. It is a forced meditation, a monastic retreat you never asked for. A particularly odd, and likely apocryphal, story that circulated about Tagliacozzi's patients was that their minds would become stuck in the same way as their bodies. It was rumored that men who underwent the procedure would become slow, minus-witted and dull, their thoughts as inflexible as their necks. This was, of course, nonsense, likely spread by critics who saw the surgery as unnatural. But it speaks to a general unease with the procedure, the idea that altering the body so radically must surely have consequences for the mind or soul. As the days tick by, a strange transformation occurs. The initial panic and frustration begin to soften, worn down by the sheer, grinding reality of your situation. You stop fighting the harness. You learn to lean into its support, to find the least uncomfortable angle, the position of minimal suffering. You are no longer a prisoner rattling the bars of your cell. You are a long-term inmate who has made a truce with his confinement. The pain in your neck is still there, a constant, dull fire. The itching still comes in maddening waves, but they have become part of the background noise of your existence. You are a creature of pure endurance. You are waiting for the day of your liberation, the day you can once again turn your head to look out the window freely. The world outside that window, once so mundane, now seems like an impossible paradise. Life turned sideways becomes a series of logistical puzzles. The most basic actions, the ones you have performed without thought since you were a child, are now complex challenges that require planning and assistance. Take drinking, for example. You cannot simply lift a cup to your lips. The angle is wrong. Your head is tilted. Your arm is in the way. At first, your attendant tries to pour water directly into your mouth from a pitcher. A messy and undignified process that leaves you sputtering, water trickling down your chin and onto the leather harness. Eventually, you discover a solution, a long straw. Not a neat, modern plastic straw, but a hollow reed, carefully cleaned. With this simple tool, you can set broth from a bowl or water from a cup, regaining a tiny sliver of independence. It feels like a monumental victory. Eating is a similar challenge. Solid food is out of the question. You cannot chew properly, and the movement of your jaw also less the delicate work on your face. So your diet is a monotonous parade of semi-minus liquids. Thin porridge for breakfast, a watery lentil soup for lunch, a pureed vegetable stew for dinner. Your attendant has to spoon it into your mouth carefully, navigating the landscape of your tilted head in the ever-present harness. You learn to swallow without moving your facial muscles, a skill you never thought you'd need. You long for the simple pleasure of biting into a crisp apple or tearing a piece of crusty bread. You have vivid dreams about food, about feasting at a great banquet, only to wake up to the familiar ache in your neck and the prospect of another bowl of lukewarm porridge. Personal hygiene becomes a major operation. Washing is a patchwork affair, a sponge bath conducted by your attendant, carefully avoiding the bandages on your arm and the harness on your torso. The feeling of being clean, truly clean, becomes a distant memory. You are acutely aware of the smells of your own confinement, the scent of stale sweat, old leather, and the faint, medicinal odor of the wound dressings. This extended period of dependency had a documented effect on the patient-surgeon relationship. You are not just Tagliacozzi's patient, you are his ward. He holds absolute authority over your life. His daily visits are the central event of your day. He inspects the wound, checks the harness, and asks brief, practical questions. His approval is what you live for. A nod from him, a quiet dude, "It is healing well," is enough to lift your spirits for hours. His silence or a slight frown can send you into a spiral of anxiety. There is a fascinating and rarely mentioned detail found in some of Tagliacozzi's case notes: the problem of earwax. With your head held in a fixed, tilted position for weeks, the natural drainage of the ear canal on the downhill side could be disrupted. This could lead to a buildup of wax, causing a feeling of fullness, hearing loss, and even dizziness. It's a minor, almost comical detail in the grand scheme of the ordeal, but it illustrates the totality of the disruption. Every single system in your body, no matter how small, is affected by this forced posture. You become an expert in a world perceived from a 45-degree angle. You learn to recognize people by their shoes before you can see their faces. The patterns on the floorboards become a familiar map. Your brain, ever adaptable, begins to recalibrate. The tilted world starts to feel normal, and you have moments where you forget your predicament, only to be brutally reminded when you try to move. The relationship with your attendant deepens. This person, whether a family member or a hired helper, becomes your hands, your neck, your lifeline to the world. They see you at your most vulnerable, your most irritable, your most helpless. A bond of profound trust, or perhaps profound resentment, is forged in the crucible of this room. The success of your recovery depends as much on their patience and diligence as it does on Tagliacozzi's genius. As the days crawl by, a sense of anticipation begins to build, overriding the boredom and discomfort. You start your countdown. 5 days left. 2, 3. You are like a prisoner awaiting his release date. The end is in sight. You can almost feel the phantom sensation of turning your head, of stretching your arm. The thought of this simple freedom is so powerful, so exquisite, that it brings tears to your eyes. You have been through the worst of it. You have endured the stillness, the sideways world. Soon, you will be cut free. The 20th day arrives not with a triumphant fanfare, but with the same quiet grey light filtering through your window as every other morning. Yet, the air in the room feels different. It's charged with anticipation. This is the day of liberation. Your morning meal of porridge goes largely untouched. Your stomach is a tight knot of nerves. Soon, Tagliacozzi arrives, accompanied by his 2 assistants. He doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He gives you a quick, assessing look. "Are you ready?" he asks. It feels like a ridiculous question. You've been ready since the moment the harness was first buckled. You give a firm nod. The process begins not with a knife, but with the unbuckling of the harness. One by one, the assistants loosen the leather straps. Each releases a small gasp of freedom. The strap around your wrist, the ones connecting your arm to your head, the tight cap. Finally, the vest around your torso, the heavy, constricting weight lifts. And for the first time in 3 weeks, your body is your own again. But you cannot move. Your muscles are locked, frozen in the position they have held for so long. The assistants have to gently, slowly, help you lower your arm. The sensation is one of exquisite pain and profound relief. Your shoulder, elbow, and wrist scream in protest. The joints are stiff. The muscles atrophied. You try to straighten your neck, and a fiery agony shoots down your spine. Freedom, it turns out, hurts. You are left with the final, most intimate connection. The pedicle, the bridge of flesh, about the width of your thumb, that still runs from your upper arm to the tip of what is now, recognizably, a nose. It looks strange and robust. A living tether. This small piece of tissue has been the sole lifeline for your new nose for 20 days, pumping blood and life into it. Now, its work is done. It is time for it to be severed. Tagliacozzi takes a tool from his tray. It is not a scalpel. It looks more like a pair of sturdy scissors or shears. A swift, clean cut is what is needed here. There is no need for the delicate carving of the initial surgery. One assistant holds your arm steady, another holds your head. Tagliacozzi positions the shears at the base of the pedicle, right where it meets your face. Hold still, he commands. One final moment. You close your eyes. You hear the metallic snip. It's a surprisingly painless sensation. The nerves in the pedicle have been stretched and traumatized for weeks, and their ability to send a clear signal of pain is diminished. It feels less like a cut and more like a sudden release of tension, a popping sensation. The final thread has been cut. A wave of dizziness washes over you as your brain processes the new reality. Your arm is free. Your head is free. They are just separate parts of your body again. You tentatively lower your arm all the way down to your side. It feels impossibly heavy and alien. You slowly, carefully, turn your head a fraction of an inch. The pain is sharp, but the movement itself, the simple act of turning your head, is a miracle. Tagliacozzi is already at work. There are now 2 new wounds to deal with. The first is on your arm, where the base of the pedicle was. It's a small, circular wound, which he quickly stitches closed. It will leave a peculiar, round scar on your bicep, a permanent reminder of the nursery where your nose was born. This scar became a sort of secret handshake among Tagliacozzi's patients, a discreet sign that they were part of an exclusive club. The second, more important wound is the tip of your new nose, where the pedicle was just snipped off. This is the final, raw piece of the puzzle. He doesn't stitch it. Instead, he begins to shape it. This is where the surgeon really becomes a sculptor. He carefully trims the excess tissue, folding the skin under to create the beginnings of nostrils, molding the tip into a more natural minus-looking shape. The exact method he used for this final sculpting is another area of intense interest for medical historians. His book provides diagrams, but they are open to interpretation. Did he use internal stitches? Did he pack the nostrils with small rolls of linen to maintain their shape as they healed? It's believed that his technique was highly individualized, adapted to the specific needs of each patient's anatomy. He was not following a formula. He was creating a unique piece of living art. Finally, the work is done. Your new nose is covered with a soft linen bandage, held in place with a light adhesive plaster made from egg whites and flour. The ordeal of the harness is over. The moment of separation is complete. You are left with a stiff neck, a weak arm, and a fragile, bandaged new feature on your face. You have survived, but the final test, the judgment of the mirror, is yet to come. The days following your liberation from the harness are a strange mixture of newfound freedom and frustrating limitation. You can walk around your room, stretch your stiff limbs, and, most gloriously, turn your head. Every small movement is a rediscovered luxury. You spend long moments just looking out the window from different angles, marveling at the simple ability to change your perspective. But your new nose is a fragile, precious thing. It's swaddled in bandages, a constant, delicate presence on your face. You are terrified of bumping it, of sneezing too hard, of doing anything that might disrupt the delicate healing process. Tagliacozzi is now no longer a jailer. but a sculptor, putting the finishing touches on his masterpiece. The initial shape of the nose was determined by the cut of the flap and the way it was stitched to your face. But now, the real artistry begins. Every day or two, he has you sit in the chair again. There is no more wine for courage, no more assistants to hold you down. This is delicate work, and it requires your still, sober cooperation. He unwraps the bandages with the care of someone handling a priceless relic. You catch glimpses of the nose in its raw state. It's still swollen, reddish minus purple in places, and not particularly nose minus light. It looks more like a lump of dough that has been stuck to your face. Your heart sinks every time you see it, but Tagliacozzi seems unconcerned. He works with a set of small, strange tools, tiny knives, smooth probes, and forceps. He is not making large cuts now. He is making tiny, incremental adjustments with a small blade. He might trim a millimeter of tissue from the edge of a nostril to improve its curve. He uses a smooth, heated probe to gently cauterize a bleeding vessel. He might make a small incision and remove a minuscule amount of underlying fatty tissue to improve the contour of the bridge. This process, called modeling, is what separated a competent surgeon from a true artist like Tagliacozzi. Anyone with a steady hand could attach a flap of skin, but to shape that flap into a convincing, aesthetically pleasing nose required an artist's eye. He had to understand the play of light and shadow on a human face, the subtle curves and planes that create a natural appearance. He was thinking about how it would look not just today, but in a year, after all the swelling had subsided and the scars had faded. A fascinating and slightly stomach-minus churning detail from his own book, Die Chirurgia per Incitium, is his description of using molds. He would sometimes create small molds out of metal or wood, shaped like the inside of a nostril. He would have the patient wear these molds inside the newly formed nose for hours at a time. The constant, gentle pressure would help the healing tissue conform to the desired shape, preventing the nostrils from collapsing or scarring over. It was a primitive form of what orthodontists now do with retainers, using sustained pressure to shape living tissue. You sit there, trying to remain perfectly still. As he pokes and prods and carves your face, it is not intensely painful, but it is deeply unnerving. He is treating your face like a piece of clay, and you can only trust that he knows what he is doing. He is obsessive about symmetry, constantly comparing one side of the nose to the other, making tiny adjustments to achieve a sense of balance. The academic debate here centers on how much of this was planned and how much was improvisation. Did Tagliacozzi have a precise, blueprint-like plan for each nose from the very beginning? Or was he an intuitive artist, responding to the way the tissue healed and making adjustments on the fly? The truth is likely somewhere in between. He was a meticulous planner, as evidenced by his detailed drawings and instructions. But surgery on living tissue is always unpredictable. He had to be able to adapt, to solve problems as they arose, to turn a flaw in the healing process into an unexpected feature of the final design. After each session of sculpting, the nose is carefully cleaned and bandaged. The process is frustratingly slow. You want to see the final result, to know if the entire ordeal was worth it, but you are forced to live in a state of suspended judgment, your future hidden behind a veil of linen. The swelling slowly begins to recede. The color changes from an angry purple to a more natural, pinkish tone. You can feel, beneath the bandages, that the shape is becoming more defined. It's a strange and hopeful sensation. Something is taking form in the center of your face. It's not just a lump of flesh anymore. It's starting to feel like a nose. The sculpting is finished. The tiny stitches have been removed. The final shape, as much as it can be controlled, has been set. Now begins the last and perhaps most nerve-racking phase of all, waiting for the graft to truly live. Your nose is no longer heavily bandaged. Instead, it's covered by a light dressing, more to protect it from accidental bumps than for any medical purpose. You are finally allowed to leave the confines of the surgeon's care and return to your own home. This transition is both a relief and a source of profound anxiety. in Tagliacozzi's workshop. You were in a controlled environment. Now, you are out in the unpredictable world. Every morning, you wake up with a moment of panic. Your first conscious thought being, is it still there? Is it okay? You carefully, tentatively, touch the skin around it. Is it warm? Warmth is good. It means blood is flowing. Is it overly tender? A bad sign. You become a hypochondriac of the face, constantly monitoring your new appendage for any sign of trouble. The greatest fear, the shadow that hangs over you, is infection. Tagliacozzi has given you strict instructions for cleaning the area. You are to use a weak wine solution on a soft linen cloth, dabbing gently around the base of the nose where the skin is still knitting together. You perform this ritual with the solemnity of a high priest. You know that a single moment of carelessness, a dirty cloth, or unwashed hands could lead to disaster. In this era, an infection is not a minor setback to be cleared up with a course of antibiotics. It is a potential catastrophe. If putrefaction were to set in, the new nose would turn dark. Its life-giving blood supply choked off. It would become necrotic, dead tissue, and in a matter of days, it could simply fall off. The image is so horrific you can barely stand to think about it. To have gone through the weeks of torture, the confinement, the pain, only to have your new nose detached from your face like an overripe fruit, is a failure too profound to contemplate. And the danger doesn't stop there. An unchecked infection on your face could easily spread to your blood, a condition that physicians of the time called blood poisoning. It was almost always fatal. So you are not just protecting your appearance, you are protecting your life. This fear of graft failure was very real. Even with Tagliacozzi's meticulous methods, not every operation was a success. His book is, understandably, a record of his triumphs. He doesn't dwell on his failures. But historians, reading between the lines and examining other contemporary accounts, know that failures did happen. The reasons are now obvious to us: bacterial infection, poor blood supply, tissue rejection. But to a 16th-century patient, it would have seemed like a cruel whim of fate, or a punishment from God. The question of whether the body could reject a piece of itself wasn't understood. The concept of a complex immune system was centuries away. Failures were often blamed on the patient's unhealthy humors or a failure to follow instructions properly. One of the more peculiar, and little-known, challenges of this period was dealing with hair. The skin of the upper arm, particularly on a man, has fine hairs. When this skin is transplanted to the nose, it doesn't magically stop being arm skin. It brings its hair follicles with it. So as you heal, you might begin to notice fine, downy hairs sprouting from the bridge or tip of your new nose. You are faced with the strange, lifelong cosmetic task of occasionally having to shave or pluck your own nose. It's a comical, absurd detail in the midst of a grand and dramatic ordeal. You live in a state of heightened caution. You avoid crowds, where a stray elbow could be a disaster. You sleep on your back, careful not to roll over and crush your fragile new face. You develop a new respect for the simple act of sneezing, trying to stifle the urge whenever it arises. Slowly, day by day, you can feel the nose becoming a more permanent part of you. The initial tenderness begins to fade. The skin feels less like a foreign object and more like your own. You can feel a faint sense of touch returning to the tip. It's a strange and wonderful discovery. You press your finger to it, and your brain registers the sensation. The nerve endings, like the blood vessels before them, are beginning to connect. The graft is taking. It is alive. The fragile new thing is becoming strong, and with that growing strength, your own hope and confidence begin to return. You might, just might, have made it through. The day arrives. It's been several months since the ordeal began. The last of the swelling has subsided. The angry redness has faded to a pale pink scar line at the base, and the skin of the new nose has settled into a natural, healthy color. Tagliacozzi has given his final approval. It is time to look. You have avoided your reflection for weeks. You've caught accidental, distorted glimpses in a window pane or a puddle of water, but you have consciously avoided looking at yourself in a proper mirror. The fear of what you might see or not see was too great. The hope was too fragile to be tested. But now, you cannot put it off any longer. You stand in your room, a polished steel mirror held in your trembling hands. In the 16th century, a high-minus quality mirror is a luxury item. It's not the perfect, flawless glass we are used to. It's a slightly warped, cloudy surface, reflecting a dimmer, softer version of reality. Perhaps this is for the best. You take a deep breath, like a diver about to plunge into deep water, and you lift the mirror to your face. For a long moment, your brain refuses to process what it's seeing. You are looking at a stranger. For years, you have been accustomed to seeing the face of a broken man, a man with a gaping hole where his features should be. You've learned to recognize yourself in that disfigurement. Now, that man is gone. In his place is a man with a face, a whole face. The nose is not perfect. It's not the elegant, aquiline nose of a Roman statue. It's a bit thicker, a bit rounder than your original nose. The one you barely remember from before the duel, or the disease. The skin texture is slightly different from the skin on your cheeks. It's the skin of your arm. After all, if someone were to look very closely, they would notice the faint, hair minus thin skull lines where it was attached. They might notice that it doesn't move quite as naturally when you wrinkle your face to smile. But it is a nose. It sits in the center of your face. It has a bridge, a tip, and two distinct nostrils. It gives your face structure, balance, and, most importantly, normalcy. You turn your head from side to side, watching how the light catches on the new planes of your face. You see a profile. For the first time in years, you had a profile. You touch the tip of the new nose, and you watch your reflection do the same. It's real. It's yours. A wave of emotion so powerful it makes your knees weak washes over you. It's not just happiness. It's a complex cocktail of relief, disbelief, and a profound, bold minus deep sense of gratitude. You think of the pain, the harness, the boredom, the fear. You think of the quiet, intense man who carved this new reality for you out of your own flesh. Every moment of suffering was a coin paid for this single, stunning moment of wholeness. Historians have often debated the aesthetic success of Tagliacozzi's work. How good were these noses? Really? We have no photographs, only the stylized engravings from his book and the written descriptions of his contemporaries. The engravings, which were likely idealized to promote his work, show impressively natural minus-looking results. Some written accounts praise his work as miraculous, while a few critics dismiss the new noses as lumpy or brutish. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. The quality likely varied from patient to patient, depending on the severity of the original injury and the individual's healing process. But for the patient, aesthetic perfection was secondary. The goal was not to win a beauty contest. The goal was to erase the mark of shame, to be able to walk through the world without being a spectacle. And by that measure, the success was total. A strange, and probably apocryphal, anecdote speaks to this very point. It's said that a former patient of Tagliacozzi's was once asked by a nobleman if he was not bothered by the fact that his new nose was clearly not his original one. The patient simply replied, "My lord, I am far too busy enjoying having a nose to worry about which one it is." You lower the mirror, your heart pounding. You look like yourself again, or rather, you look like a new version of yourself. A man who has been through a fire and been remade. The scar on your face is gone, replaced by a testament to surgical genius. But you know that the internal scars, the memory of the shame and the ordeal, will remain. You are not the same man who first walked into Tagliacozzi's study. You are stronger, you are whole, and you are ready to face the world again. You decide to walk through the Piazza Maggia, the grand central square of Bologna. 4 years. This was a place you would only cross with your head down, your cloak pulled high, moving as quickly as possible. It was a stage where your shame was put on public display. Today, you walk into the square with a new sense of purpose. This is your first real test. You keep your posture straight, your gaze level. You are not seeking attention, but you are no longer trying to evade it. You walk past a group of merchants haggling over the price of cloth. One of them glances at you, his eyes flickering over your face for a fraction of a second. And then he immediately looks away, back to his argument. You saw nothing of interest. It is the most beautiful, most profound moment of non-minus reaction you have ever experienced. You continue your walk. A pair of university students, deep in debate, jostle past you without a second look. A woman buying flowers from a stall gives you a brief, polite smile as you pass. The kind of meaningless, everyday courtesy that has been absent from your life for so long. No one is staring. No one is pointing. No children are hiding behind their mother's skirts. You are just another face in the crowd. The anonymity is intoxicating. You feel light, almost giddy. You are a ghost who has suddenly become solid again. You are a walking miracle, but a subtle one. The genius of Tagliacozzi's work is not that it is spectacular, but that it is unremarkable. He has not given you a feature that draws the eye, but one that allows the eye to pass over you without comment. He has restored you to the background, and it feels like being elevated to the highest honor. Your own perception of the world has changed. Before, every person you saw was a potential judge. Every glance was a verdict. Now, you see them simply as people, busy with their own lives, their own worries, their own dramas. The intense, paranoid self-minus consciousness that has been your constant companion for years begins to dissolve. Of course, your journey is not entirely over. You will have to field questions from friends and family. Those who knew you before. How will you explain it? The full story is so bizarre, so extreme, that it's almost unbelievable. You settle on a simplified, vague explanation. A new surgical technique. A brilliant professor at the university. You let them fill in the blanks, mostly too polite, or to stand by the result, to press for details. The medical community of Bologna, however, is a different matter. You are now a piece of living evidence in a fierce academic debate. Tagliacozzi's rivals and critics, who had dismissed his methods as dangerous charlatanism, are now confronted with your undeniably whole face. Surgeons and physicians ask to view you, to examine the work. You become a minor celebrity in the halls of the university, a testament to the success of the Bologna method. There's a curious detail in the social history of this period regarding dueling scars. While a missing nose was a mark of ultimate shame, a small, dashing scar on the cheek was often seen as a mark of honor, a sign that a man had defended his reputation. Some historians have humorously debated whether any of Tagliacozzi's patients, having regained their nose, might have been tempted to pick a fight just to acquire a more fashionable, less catastrophic facial wound. It's an unlikely scenario, but it highlights the strange and complex codes of honor that governed your world. You find yourself in a tavern one evening, a place you would never have dared to enter before. You order a glass of wine and sit in a corner, just watching the ebb and flow of conversation, the arguments, the laughter. It's the music of normal life, and you are finally a part of the orchestra again. A man at a nearby table catches your eye and gives you a simple, "Comrade landlord." You nod back. It's a small, meaningless exchange, but it feels like a coronation. You are living proof that a person can be remade, that what is lost can be, if not perfectly restored, then at least convincingly rebuilt. Your new nose is more than just flesh and cartilage. It's a symbol of hope. It tells a story of incredible suffering and even more incredible resilience. You carry the legacy of ancient Indian surgeons, of secretive Sicilian families, and of the quiet, brilliant man who dared to turn your home into a nursery for your face. You walk out of the tavern and into the cool night air, taking a deep breath through a nose that feels, finally and completely, like your own. The initial euphoria of being whole again slowly begins to fade, replaced by the more complex realities of life. Your new nose has granted you anonymity in the bustling piazza. But among those who know your story, you are anything but anonymous. You are a subject of intense curiosity. And not all of it is friendly. The whispers start subtly. You hear them in the marketplace, in the church, in the quiet moments when people think you are not listening. They are not whispers of admiration anymore. They are whispers of suspicion, of fear, of judgment. It is not natural. One woman mutters to another as you pass. To graft flesh like a gardener grafts a branch onto a tree. Man is not a plant. I heard the devil guided the surgeon's hand. Another says, it is a blasphemy, an affront to God's creation. You begin to realize that while you have solved the problem of your physical appearance, you have stumbled into a new and more insidious problem, a theological one, in a deeply religious society, where the body is seen as a divine creation. The act of surgically altering it is viewed by many as a form of hubris. If God, in his infinite wisdom, allowed your nose to be lost whether to disease or violence, who was this mere mortal surgeon to defy that judgment? The criticism comes not just from the uneducated and superstitious. It comes from the pulpit. Some priests and theologians begin to preach against this new surgery. They argue that suffering is a test from God, a way to purify the soul. To surgically remove the physical mark of that suffering is to reject the test, to take a prideful shortcut around a spiritual lesson. Your new nose, the very thing that has restored your dignity in the secular world, is now being framed as a mark of spiritual weakness. This controversy was very real. Tagliacozzi spent a significant portion of his life and his great book defending his work on moral and religious grounds. He argued, quite compellingly, that his work was not an act of pride, but an act of charity. He saw himself as restoring the divine image in which man was made. He argued that he was not defying God's will, but acting as an instrument of God's compassion, helping to alleviate the suffering of his fellow man, may restore, rebuild, and make whole the parts which nature has given, but which fortune has taken away. He wrote, not that we may delight in them, but that we may buoy up the spirit, and help the mind of the afflicted. The debate rages, and you are caught in the middle. People who once pitied you now look at you with a mixture of unfear. You are a living embodiment of a controversial idea. Have you made a deal with a devilish science to regain your face? Are you walking around with a feature that is, in some fundamental way, an illusion, a lie against the natural order? There's a strange and little minus known parallel in the legal world of the time. Courts were grappling with questions of identity. If a man, thought to be dead, returned to his village, was his wife still his wife if she had remarried? If a man's face was so completely changed, was he, in a legal sense, still the same person? The law, like theology, struggled to keep up with the radical possibilities that science was beginning to present. Your nose is not just a medical issue. It's a legal and philosophical puzzle. You find that the stares have returned, but they are of a different kind. Before, they were stares of revulsion and pity. Now, they are stares of morbid fascination. People try to get a closer look at the nose, searching for the seams, for the proof that it is an artificial construction. The very normalcy you craved has been replaced by a new form of otherness. You are no longer the man with no nose. You are the man with the new nose, which, in some ways, is just as isolating. This backlash forces you to confront the deeper meaning of your journey. You didn't just want a nose. You wanted acceptance. You wanted to be normal. But you are learning that normal is a fragile consensus. By stepping so far outside the bounds of what was considered possible, you have made yourself permanently extraordinary. You have fixed your face, but you may have marked your soul in the eyes of your community. The whispers follow you, a constant reminder that your path back to an ordinary life is far more complicated than a simple act of surgery. As winter approaches, a new and even more bizarre rumor begins to circulate. It starts as a joke in a tavern, a bit of morbid humor, but it spreads like wildfire, fueled by the public's fascination and fear surrounding your procedure. The story goes like this. Because the nose was grown on your arm, it retains a memory of its original location, and just as a person's hands and feet get cold in winter, so to will this transplanted piece of arm skin, the whisperers claim that on the first truly frosty day, your new nose will turn an alarming shade of blue, become numb, and, in the most dramatic telling of the tale, simply drop off your face, landing with a soft thud in the snow. You hear this story and, at first, you want to laugh at its sheer absurdity. It's a peasant superstition, a ghost story for the gullible. But the rumor is persistent. People look at you with a new kind of speculative pity as the autumn leaves fall and a chill enters the air. They are waiting for the punchline of a joke, and your face is the stage. The anxiety, as irrational as it seems, begins to creep in. You find yourself paying closer attention to the temperature of your nose. On a cool morning, you press your fingers to it. Does it feel colder than the rest of your face? You can't be sure. The circulation in a skin graft is, in reality, often less robust than in the original tissue, so it might genuinely be more susceptible to cold. But your fear blows this minor physiological fact into a full minus-blown existential terror. This myth, as ridiculous as it sounds, became one of the most enduring undamaging criticisms of Tagliacozzi's work. It was famously mentioned by the 17th-century writer Samuel Butler in his satirical poem Amati Brass, which mocked the scientific pioneers of the day. He wrote of a man who wore his nose in his pocket on cold days. The image was so comical and so memorable that it cemented the idea of the sympathetic nose in the popular imagination for centuries. It became a powerful piece of negative propaganda, suggesting that the surgery was not just blasphemous, but fundamentally flawed and temporary. Why was this particular myth so powerful? Historians suggest it tapped into a deep seated belief in what was called sympathetic magic, the idea that objects that were once connected continue to influence each other even after being separated. It's the same principle behind a folk belief that you can curse someone by getting a lock of their hair. The nose, in this worldview, was still psychically and physically tied to the arm. It was a part of a larger, pre-scientific understanding of the body as a network of sympathies and correspondences, rather than a system of flesh, bone, and blood vessels. You find yourself taking absurd precautions. You wear a scarf wrapped high around your face, even on moderately cool days. You avoid standing in drafts. You spend more time indoors, near the warmth of the fire. You are being held hostage by a ghost story. One morning, you wake up to find the city transformed. The rooftops are white. The air is sharp and still. The first true frost of the year has arrived. Your heart pounds in your chest. This is the day of reckoning. You refuse to hide. You are tired of being ruled by the fears of others. You wrap a cloak around yourself for warmth, but you leave your face bare. You walk out into the brilliant, cold morning and head once again for the Piazza Maggia. You can feel the cold air on your skin, a clean, sharp sensation. You can feel it on your cheeks, your forehead, and yes, on your nose. It feels cold, just like the rest of your face. You walk through the square, your head held high, making eye contact with the people you pass. You see the curiosity in their eyes, the expectation. They are waiting for the show. You stay in the square for almost an hour, walking, observing, breathing the frosty air. Your nose doesn't turn blue. It doesn't go numb. It certainly doesn't fall off. It just gets a little rosy at the tip from the cold, exactly like everyone else's. You have faced down the myth. You have proven, with your own living flesh, that the rumors are false. A few people look disappointed, as if they have been cheated out of a promised spectacle. But most simply lose interest and go about their day. You have survived not just the surgeon's knife and the crucible of the harness, but the even more insidious power of public superstition. Your nose is not a piece of your arm anymore. It is a part of your face, and it is here to stay, come frost or sun. The whispers and rumors, though you have faced them down, take their toll not just on you, but on the man who remade you. Gaspare Tagliacozzi is a man of science and faith, and he sees his reputation, the very integrity of his life's work, being chipped away by ignorance and superstition. He realizes it is not enough to simply perform the surgery. He must explain it. He must defend it. He must build a fortress of knowledge so strong that the arrows of rumor cannot penetrate its walls. And so, he embarks on his great project. He decides to write a book. Not a small pamphlet or a simple surgical manual, but a comprehensive, definitive treatise on the art of reconstruction. It will be the culmination of his entire career. A legacy set down in ink and paper. You and others like you, and others like you, become part of this project. He calls you back to his study, but this time, he is accompanied by an artist, a skilled draftsman with a keen eye for detail. With your permission, you become a subject, not for surgery, but for illustration. The artist sketches your face, capturing the final, successful result of the procedure. He draws the faint scar on your arm, the testament to the nursery. But the illustrations go far beyond simple before and after portraits. Tagliacozzi is determined to demystify the entire process. He has the artist create a series of detailed, step by minus step engravings. There are drawings of the surgical instruments, each one labeled. There are diagrams showing the precise way to cut the flap on the arm. There are images of a patient sitting in the chair, his arm being stitched to his face. And, most famously, there are multiple, detailed illustrations of the harness, showing its complex system of straps and buckles from every angle. This decision to illustrate the box so lavishly was revolutionary. Most medical texts of the time were dense blocks of Latin, perhaps with a few crude woodcuts. Tagliacozzi's book, Dica Turum Chirurgia per Incitium, was conceived as both a scientific text and a work of art. He understood that a single, clear picture could explain his methods more effectively than 1,000 words. It was a bold and incredibly expensive undertaking. The cost of commissioning and engraving the dozens of detailed plates was astronomical. The book itself is a masterpiece of Renaissance scholarship. It is written in elegant, academic Latin, the universal language of science at the time. It is divided into two parts. The first part is a long, philosophical defense of the surgery. This is where Tagliacozzi directly confronts his critics. He quotes the Bible, ancient Greek philosophers, and revered medical authorities to argue that restoring a person's natural form is a noble and pious act. He tackles the rumors head on, patiently explaining the biological principles of the graft, refuting the cold weather myth with scientific reasoning. The second part is the practical, to guide. It is a meticulous, step by step description of the entire procedure, from the initial consultation to the final sculpting. He describes the ideal patient, courageous and patient. The best time of year for the surgery, autumn, when the weather is mild, and the proper diet for recovery. Nothing is left to chance. It is a work of staggering detail and clarity. Fascinating, and very telling. Detail in the book is the section on patient selection. Tagliacozzi is brutally honest about who should not undergo the surgery. He warns against operating on those who are imprudent, restless, and cowardly, as they will not have the fortitude to endure the confinement. He also, rather controversially, advises against operating on people of the lower classes if they have to work with their hands for a living, as the long recovery period would be financially ruinous for them. This has led some historians to accuse him of elitism, while others argue it was a pragmatic and even compassionate form of medical advice in his time. You watch this great work take shape, and you feel a sense of pride. Your personal journey of suffering and recovery is being transformed into something permanent, something that will outlive you. It is being codified as science. Your story, stripped of your name but preserved in its essential details, will be read by surgeons for generations to come. When the book is finally published in 1597, it is a triumph. A heavy, beautiful volume, bound in leather, filled with clear, elegant prose and stunning illustrations. It is a monument to a lifetime of work, a defiant statement against superstition. Tagliacozzi sends copies to universities and royal courts across Europe. He has created his legacy. He has ensured that his methods will not be forgotten, that they will not be dismissed as a bizarre myth. He has laid it all bare for the world to see, confident that in the end, reason and knowledge will prevail. Tagliacozzi's book is a sensation. It solidifies his reputation not just as a skilled craftsman, but as a true pioneer of surgical science. His fame spreads beyond the borders of Italy. He is no longer just a local wonder. He is a figure of European importance. In his home city of Bologna, his status reaches its zenith. The city, proud of its famous son and the prestige he brings to its university, decides to honor him in a way normally reserved for princes and generals. They commission a statue of him, to be placed in the hallowed hall of the anatomical theater, the very heart of the medical school. You go to see it. There, amidst the busts of ancient Greek physicians and esteemed professors, stands Tagliacozzi. Immortalized in stone, he is depicted not as a scholar holding a book, but as a surgeon holding a nose in his hand. It is a bold, even startling, image. He is presenting his most famous creation to the world, a look of calm, scientific confidence on his stone face. The statue is a public declaration of victory. The university and the city are officially endorsing his work, elevating it from a controversial procedure to a celebrated specialty. For a time, it seems that science and reason have won the day. You feel a sense of vindication. The whispers have been silenced by the chisel of the sculptor and the weight of the printed word. But the victory is not as complete as it seems. The publication of the book and the erection of the statue, far from ending the debate, actually provide a clearer target for his most ardent critics. Before, they were attacking rumors and whispers. Now, they have a physical book and a stone statue to rail against. The scandal, instead of dying down, takes on a new, more academic flavor. Theologians write lengthy, complex tracts arguing against the presumption of the surgery. They pick apart Tagliacozzi's religious justifications, claiming his interpretations of scripture are self-serving. Rival surgeons, perhaps motivated by professional jealousy, publish pamphlets questioning his techniques, suggesting that the long-term outcomes are not as good as he claims. The statue itself becomes a focal point of controversy. The image of him holding a nose is seen by some as grotesque and prideful. They argue it celebrates the mutilation of the arm more than the restoration of the face. It is a symbol not of healing, but of a man playing God, holding a piece of his unnatural creation like a trophy. This ongoing debate highlights a fundamental tension in the Renaissance world. It was an age of incredible discovery and innovation, but it was also an age of deep piety and tradition. Men like Tagliacozzi lived right on the fault line between these two worlds. They were pushing the boundaries of what was known, while still trying to remain within the framework of a divinely ordered universe. The question of whether he was a hero of science or a heretic was never fully settled in his lifetime, and in some ways, it is a debate that continues among historians today. Was he a modern man, a forerunner of the scientific revolution, or a profoundly medieval one, trying to reconcile his faith with his craft? The answer is probably that he was, complexly, both. A particularly strange and persistent accusation that dogged him was that he was somehow in league with the executioners. Public executions were a common and brutal part of city life. The theory went that Tagliacozzi was secretly paying executioners to provide him with the noses of recently hanged criminals, which he would then try to attach to his wealthy clients. This was, of course, a complete fabrication. His entire method was based on using the patient's own flesh, but the rumor persisted because it was lurid and sensational, and it connected his claim, scholarly work, to the blood and grime of the executioner's lot. You lived through this period of fame and infamy. You see your surgeon celebrated as a hero and condemned as a heretic. You learn that restoring a man's face is one thing, but changing the mind of a society is a much more difficult procedure. The world, it seems, was not quite ready for Gaspare Tagliacozzi. It admired his results, but feared his methods. It celebrated his genius, but was deeply suspicious of his ambition. He had won the surgical battle, but the cultural war raged on. The stone statue stood proudly in the university, but the whispers in the piazza never entirely went away. As time passes, you begin to see beyond the public figure of the famous surgeon and the controversial pioneer. Through brief interactions and the stories that circulate among his former patients, you catch glimpses of the man himself, Gaspare Tagliacozzi, and he is more complex than either his admirers or his detractors would have you believe. The myth of the cold, arrogant, God-minus-playing scientist begins to fall away, replaced by the image of a man of quiet, devout habits. You learn that he is a devoted family man, a respected member of his local parish. He doesn't live in a grand palace, despite the high fees he commands. He lives in a comfortable but modest home, his life ordered by the rhythms of his work, his family, and his faith. The man who seems so detached and clinical as he carved into your flesh is, by all accounts, a person of deep empathy. But his empathy was a practical, unsentimental kind. He understood that the greatest kindness he could offer a suffering patient was not a comforting word or a sympathetic ear, but his focused, dispassionate skill. His operating room calm was not a sign of coldness, but of a profound respect for the gravity of his work. He knew that a single slip of his hand, a moment of emotional distraction, could lead to disaster. His piety, which his critics dismissed as a cynical cover for his blasphemous work, appears to be entirely genuine. He saw no conflict between his scalpel and his crucifix. In his mind, God was the ultimate creator, and he was merely a humble repairman. He was fixing a broken part of a divine machine. This worldview, while difficult for his more rigid contemporaries to accept, was the cornerstone of his identity. He was able to push the boundaries of science precisely because he believed he had a divine mandate to do so. You learn of his charitable work, a detail often lost in the noise of the great nasal controversy. He frequently treated the poor for free, especially for simpler procedures like repairing a hair lip on a child. He saw it as his Christian duty. This was not something he advertised. It was a quiet, consistent part of his practice. It paints a picture of a man driven by more than just fame or money. He was genuinely committed to the idea of restoring dignity. One of the most humanizing, undebated aspects of his personality was his apparent thin skin. For a man of such incredible professional courage, he was deeply sensitive to criticism. The accusations of his rivals and the condemnations from the pulpit genuinely wounded him. His great book, De Cure to Rome, is not just a scientific text. It's a deeply personal and sometimes defensive document. You can feel his frustration in its pages as he repeatedly tries to explain the righteousness of his cause. Some historians see this as a sign of intellectual arrogance, an inability to accept criticism. Others see it as the understandable pain of a true pioneer who feels profoundly misunderstood by the very society he is trying to serve. A small, telling anecdote that has survived is that he was a meticulous dresser. He was known for his fine, well-minus kept robes and his neat, professional appearance. This wasn't just vanity. In an era when surgeons were trying to elevate their status above that of common barbers, appearance mattered. His professionalism was a performance, a way of signaling that he was a man of learning and discipline, not a backminor butcher. He understood the power of perception. As the years go by, you see him age. The dark beard becomes flecked with grey. A few more lines appear around his steady, intelligent eyes. He continues to teach, to operate, to refine his techniques. He never wavers in his conviction, even as the controversies continue to swirl around him. Seeing him not as a mythical figure, but as a monarch, brilliant, stubborn, and sensitive changes your understanding of your own story. Your transformation was not the result of some abstract, impersonal science. It was the result of one man's unique, complex, and sometimes contradictory character. Your new nose was born from his intellect, his faith, his ambition, and his compassion. He was a man perfectly of his time, a Renaissance man. In the truest sense of the word, a bridge between the ancient world of faith and the modern world of science. And you, and the handful of others like you, are his living legacy, walking proof of what was possible when those two worlds met in the hands of a master. In the autumn of 1599, just 2 years after the publication of his monumental book, Gaspare Tagliacozzi dies. His death is not dramatic or mysterious. He succumbs to a fever, a common and often fatal ailment of the time. He is only in his early 50s. The great surgeon, the man who rebuilt so many others, could not be saved from a simple illness. His death leaves a vacuum for a generation. Nasal reconstruction in Europe had been synonymous with one name. No, that name was gone. You and the other Tagliacozzi neon noses, as you are sometimes called, suddenly feel a new kind of vulnerability. Your creator is gone. The single greatest champion of the procedure is no longer there to defend it, to teach it, to ensure its legacy. In the years immediately following his death, there is a flicker of hope. One of his students, a man named Geographic, attempts to carry on his work. He writes his own book, largely based on his master's teachings. But the spark is not the same. Cortesi is a competent surgeon, but he lacks Tagliacozzi's unique combination of genius, obsessive dedication, and moral fervor. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the art begins to fade. Without its master practitioner, the procedure starts to seem impossibly difficult and risky. Other surgeons try to replicate it, reading the meticulous instructions in Dico to Rum, but they often fail. They lack the years of hands-on experience, the intuitive feel for the tissue that Tagliacozzi possessed. A failed operation is a powerful deterrent, and for every success, there seem to be several grisly failures. The critics, who had been held at bay by Tagliacozzi's powerful reputation, now rush in to fill the void. The cold weather myth, which he had so patiently debunked, comes roaring back to life, stronger than ever. The theological objections regain their power. Without Tagliacozzi to offer his eloquent, faith-based countergemester, the surgery is once again painted as a blasphemous and unnatural act. The world was also changing. The intellectual climate of the early 17th century was, in some ways, less open to this kind of radical surgery than the High Renaissance had been. A new wave of religious conservatism was sweeping across parts of Europe. The spirit of bold, human-centered inquiry was, in some circles, being replaced by a more rigid orthodoxy. One of the great historical debates is why, exactly, the Italian method of rhinoplasty was so completely abandoned. Was it simply too difficult? Was the culture and religious opposition too strong? Or was it, as some have suggested, a matter of fashion? Some historians argue that with the decline of dueling and the better, though still primitive understanding of how to manage syphilis, the demand for nasal reconstruction simply fell. There were fewer less people walking the streets, and thus, fewer patients willing to undergo the extreme ordeal. The art may have died out simply because its customer base disappeared. Whatever the reason, the decline was swift and total. Within a few decades of Tagliacozzi's death, his revolutionary techniques were seen as a historical curiosity, a bizarre and extreme procedure from a bygone era. His magnificent book, with its beautiful and precise illustrations, gathered dust in university libraries. Surgeons read it not as a practical guide, but as a piece of medical history, shaking their heads at the audacity and strangeness of their predecessors. The statue in the anatomical theatre remained, but it was now seen as an oddity, a tribute to a man whose strange obsession had been a dead end. You live long enough to see this happen. You, the walking, breathing testament to his genius, become a relic. People look at your nose not with art a modern miracle, but with the kind of curiosity they might reserve for an old suit of armor. You are a reminder of a forgotten art. You outlive the fame of the procedure that gave you back your life. The world has moved on, forgotten the man and his methods. The knowledge has not been built upon. It has been buried. For nearly 200 years. The art of the arm minus grown nose will lie dormant. A lost secret waiting to be rediscovered. And you, with your perfectly functional, slightly unconventional nose, are left to wonder at the strange tides of history. How a brilliant idea can flourish, and then, just as quickly, vanish from the world. You are an old man now. Decades have passed since the ordeal that gave you back your face. Your hair is white. Your hands are spotted with age. The wild of your youth. The boisterous, violent, brilliant world of the high Renaissance has faded. New ideas, new conflicts, and new kings have taken the stage. Your nose, once a 9 days wonder, is now just a part of your old, lined face. It has served you well. It has weathered countless winters, and no, it has never once tried to fall off. You have outlived Gaspare Tagliacozzi by many years. You have watched as his name, once spoken with armed controversy, has slowly faded into obscurity. His great book is a relic in the university library. His statue gathers dust. The art he perfected has vanished. A strange and brilliant dream that the world has forgotten upon waking. You are one of the last living monuments to his genius. A secret you carry in the middle of your face. When you die, you imagine, the last echo of his work will die with you. But the currents of history are long, deep, and strange, and a truly great idea, once planted, never truly dies. It only lies dormant, waiting for the right season to be rediscovered. The story now leaves your quiet life in Bologna and travels forward in time. Nearly 200 years. The world is a different place. The British Empire is stretching its fingers across the globe, and in India, a new generation of European surgeons is encountering medical practices that defy their understanding. In 1794, 2 British officers in the Maratha court are captured. As punishment, their noses and one of their hands are cut off. They survive, but they are hideously disfigured. Then, something remarkable happens. They are taken to a man, not a university-trained surgeon, but a humble putter. This local craftsman performs a miracle. He takes a flap of skin from one of the officers' foreheads, shapes it, and stitches it into place, creating a new, functional nose. The ancient Indian method, the once as age-rooted described thousands of years ago, has survived, passed down not in books, but from master to apprentice in an unbroken chain. An account of this procedure, with a detailed illustration, is published in a London periodical, The Gentleman's Magazine. It causes a stir. Here is a solution to an old problem, coming from a place the British considered backward and unscientific. In London, a surgeon named Joseph Constantine Carpe reads these accounts. He is intrigued. He has seen the noseless veterans of the Napoleonic Wars. The problem of facial disfigurement is not an ancient one. It is very current. Inspired by these reports from India, he begins to research the history of the procedure. He digs deep into the old medical libraries, searching for any European precedent. And there, he finds it, a dusty, forgotten, leather-bound book with stunningly clear engravings. Dika to Rom Sharugriapa in City N.M. He finds the work of Gaspare Tagliacozzi. He realizes that this new Indian method is actually a cousin to a lost European art. He is not inventing something new. He is resurrecting something old. Historians still debate the exact flow of inspiration. Was Carpe directly inspired by Tagliacozzi's book, or was he more moved by the living proof from India? Only later using Tagliacozzi's work as a historical justification, it was likely a combination of both. The story from India proved it was possible. The book from Bologna showed him how a European master had once achieved it. In 1814, Carpe performed his own rhinoplasty operations onto British Army officers in London, one using the Indian forehead flap, the other attempting the Italian arm flap. They are successful. The art is reborn. From that moment, the line to today is direct and unbroken. Carpe's work inspired others. The techniques were refined, improved upon by the desperate necessities of the First World War, with surgeons like Harold Gillies rebuilding the shattered faces of soldiers in the trenches. The development of anesthesia and antiseptics removed the terrible barriers of pain and infection that you had to endure. The skin graft, the pedicle flap, the very principles pioneered by the man who rebuilt your face, became foundational techniques of modern plastic and reconstructive surgery. The quiet, brilliant man from Bologna was not a dead end. He was a seed that lay dormant for 2 centuries, waiting for the right mind to come along and water it. Your journey, your ordeal, was not just a personal story of suffering and redemption. It was a crucial, forgotten chapter in a much larger story. A story that connects a potter in India, a surgeon in Renaissance Italy, and every single person today whose life and face have been made whole again by the art of the gentle blade. And so, the story of the nose, and the man who grew it on an arm, gently fades. It becomes a murmur in the quiet of your room, a distant echo. The sharp details of the surgeon's blade and the heavy weight of the leather harness can soften now, dissolving into the comfortable darkness around you. Let the whispers of history become a gentle, lulling sound, like the turning of pages in a book you no longer need to read. There is nothing left to analyze, nothing more to learn. The journey is complete. You can feel the story's gentle current carrying you now, not to another chapter, but to a place of deeper stillness, a place of rest. You can allow your mind to drift away from the streets of Bologna, away from the lecture halls and the operating chairs. You can let it float on the slow, easy tide of your own breathing. Feel the support beneath you, the gentle weight of the blanket over you. The world of the story recedes, and the safe, quiet world of your own room becomes your reality, and even that can begin to fade as you drift further down into a place of peace, a place where thoughts are as soft and fleeting as clouds in a twilight sky. A place where all that is broken can be gently rebuilt in the quiet of a dream. Our narrative has reached its peaceful end. It's okay if you're still here with me. Feel free to press play on another journey, or simply enjoy this deep and comfortable quiet. Good night.